Hello, and welcome back to the Real American Podcast, as much a review of the original G.I. Joe TV series as it is a review of the accuracy of my childhood memories. We're stepping into the third episode, The Worms of Death. The Joes are moving on to the second leg of their three-legged fetch quest to get the three elements to power their mass device, which is a teleporter that they'll use to combat Cobra's mass device, which they've been using to wreak havoc around the globe. They made the Eiffel Tower disappear and kidnapped all of the world's leaders, which they have enslaved with mind control headbands. The episode opens with a recap of the last two episodes, and it makes mention of the fact that Destro's mass device is ultra sophisticated.
Cobra and Destro use their ultra-sophisticated mass device to steal America's most powerful satellite.
That is the least classy way I can think of to describe something. It also says that Cobra disintegrated the Eiffel Tower. I thought they just stole it, but apparently they destroyed it forever, according to the narrator. So no more Eiffel Tower, and the people of France will be sad forever. The narrator also refers to Dr. Vandermeer as a famous scientist, not calling him by name. This is a terrible error. He's one of my favorite characters, and it makes me feel like maybe he's not going to be making an appearance after this initial miniseries, which is totally going to bum me out because all the stills I get of him are priceless.
Scarlet, Wild Bill, and Gung-Ho fly to a New England farm to rescue a famous scientist.
In this 23-minute cartoon, there is a lot of recycled material. The opening song is 1 minute long, the closing song is 36 seconds long, and there was a recap of the previous two episodes that was 1 minute long. So that's 2 minutes and 36 seconds of recycled material, in addition to all the cut to commercial breaks. With each episode, it seems like there's less and less new footage. Our first scene of actual new footage, we find Cobra Commander talking to all the peoples of the world. He's taken over all television and radio stations again, and he is claiming that if they do not surrender to Cobra, there will be devastation, ruin, chaos, etc.
Devastation! Ruin! Chaos!
Conversing with the Baroness, Destro makes the point that Cobra Commander has used up almost all of the catalytic elements, capturing the Red Square Army and stealing and disintegrating, I guess, the Eiffel Tower. Baroness attempts to ease his fears by letting him know that Major Blood is on the case, a fact that should not make anyone feel any better about anything. Destro throws a little bit of a temper tantrum and throws a very nice straight right to a nearby concrete wall, putting a big dent in it. This made me wonder if the metal around him is some sort of supersuit like Dr. Doom or Iron Man, and it got me wondering, can he take that thing off, or is it sealed to his skin? Is he just super jacked and just doesn't feel pain? I hope they explain it at some point, but I doubt it. I kind of always remember wondering what was up with him. We then shoot to the Sea of Ice, where Major Blood is attempting to get a repair robot up and running so he can send it into the radioactive cave to collect the crystal and deal with any of the remaining Joes. This robot is another example of cutting corners with sound. This robot sounds exactly like the search probe from the original Star Trek. Here, take a listen. We then have our first Circle K glitch in the Matrix moment. Major Blood is conversing with one Cobra Trooper when suddenly 8 more Cobra Troopers appear out of thin air behind him. This can only mean the world of G.I. Joe is nothing more than an ultra-sophisticated virtual reality built to enslave humans and harness them for their precious BTUs. Or they just didn't want to go back and draw some guys into those frames. Next, they send the repair bot in to search for G.I. Joes and Red Crystal. It busts into the room that Snake Eyes is hanging out in, where he's been horribly irradiated. It shoots lasers in every direction and hits absolutely nothing. Snake Eyes sneaks out the back of the tunnel, where he's met by Major Blood, who shows more compassion for him than any of his G.I. Joe compatriots except Scarlet. He's carrying the Red Crystal, and Major Blood still decides to let him go. He'll die soon enough, is his logic.
Let him go! He'll die soon enough!
Looking like a lit Christmas tree, Snake Eyes stumbles off into the Arctic to die soon, I assume. Sitting in a chair that looks like Professor X's Cerebro, Duke attempts to recall some of his forgotten memories from his time at Cobra's base. Unfortunately, all he can remember is images of the slave girl Selena and not any coordinates, or even a general location, or anything even remotely useful. It's actually pretty unclear what the chair is that he's sitting in and what it's actually trying to do. I'm not sure if it's trying to bring back forgotten memories or it's helping him with remote viewing. Either way, it's odd that he gets up immediately after being in that chair and heads right back to work. I'm no expert on military protocol, but I'm pretty sure gaping holes in your short-term memory disqualify you from active duty. Scooby-Dooby, yabba-dabba, Scooby-Dooby-Doo. The Joes all head to the map room and discuss the second element they'll be going after, the heavy water, which is located in the deepest trench in the ocean floor. I can only assume that they are speaking of the Mariana Trench, which is 36,000 feet deep, U.S., or 10,994 meters for everybody else. At its lowest point, has 15,750 psi. That's 1,000 times standard atmospheric pressure. In a little bit, those numbers are going to be exceedingly important. The Joes head to the deck of their aircraft carrier, and we have the product placement for the episode. This time it's not a vehicle, but a character, Torpedo, who is affectionately referred to as Pedo. He's been brought on to lead the mission because he is a specialist with all things underwater. It made me wonder if, while looking through personnel records, Duke had to ask for the Pedo file to make his ultimate selection.
Hey, what's happening, landlubbers?
If you'd like to acquire your own Torpedo action figure, you can get one on eBay for the low price of $4.25. Duke instructs the Joes to follow Pedo's lead and not get out of their depth suits, as the pressure will crush them like a grape. Conveniently, one of the Joes is eating grapes apparently for the first time ever. He throws one in his mouth and it goes pretty good, and then just squishes the entire bushel with his other hand. Pedo then instructs all the Joes to synchronize their depth gauges, which I don't think is the thing. I think you synchronize your watches, but a gauge just tells you how deep you are, and everyone's is going to read differently. I think that Duke has been affected pretty adversely by his time at Cobra's base. The mind control headbands have a pretty bad effect on his mental state. Certainly his decision-making process. He's chosen someone to lead the team who might very well be a pedophile and also doesn't know that much about underwater adventures. And in addition, some of the other Joes he's selected aren't even capable of eating grapes without a disaster. I think he definitely needs to be brought in for further medical evaluation. Back in the Arctic, we find Snake Eyes, who's in pretty bad shape, trudging through the snow, moving along. Eventually he falls down a snowdrift and comes upon a wolf who is caught in a hunter's trap. He thinks about leaving the wolf there and then changes his mind and decides to free it. He continues trudging through the snow, and the wolf opts to follow behind him. The two are making their way through the woods when they're confronted by a bear with the voice of a cougar. Here, have a listen. So far, award for cheapest department on G.I. Joe would have to go to the audio crew. The bear bitch slaps Snake Eyes and subdues his wolf as well, and is about to enjoy a fine dinner when some old blind Irishman shows up and saves them both with his laser spear.
Even though I cannot see you, I can tell a young, strong man you are, 'tis sure. But what you are doing in these bleak hills, I do not know.
The first thing I thought is, who the fuck is this guy and what is he doing in the middle of the woods with a laser spear? But I guess we're just supposed to accept it. I assume they will explain who he is later on in the episode. He loads Snake Eyes and the wolf onto his dog sled and makes his way back to his cabin, leaving the radioactive canister behind in the snow. Back at Cobra headquarters, Major Blood presents Destro and Cobra Commander with a jug of the radioactive crystal, his first victory. Good for him. Destro says, "I salute you," and does not salute. Kind of a dick move. They recap the fact that if they get all the elements, the planet will be theirs. It looked to me like Major Blood probably brought about a 2-liter of the radioactive crystal, and the cave itself probably held about 1,000 2-liter bottles worth. Why he left any crystal in the cave makes no sense. The Joes could easily go back there and collect some. And speaking of the Joes, we find them making their way to the bottom of the Mariana Trench to collect the heavy water. There's a lot of giant stone columns surrounding the pool of heavy water, which makes some of the Joes uneasy. They in fact contain gigantic tube worms that are going to attempt to eat anyone that comes close to the pool. The noise these worms make is about the most awful sound I have heard in a long time, and it is incredibly high in the mix. This is a 3rd strike for the audio department. I think that what they did to produce this sound is run their fingers along the surface of a balloon. Here, have a listen. Before the Joes can collect the heavy water, Cobra launches a sneak attack in an attempt to wipe them out and get all of the water for themselves. Before this battle can really get underway, the worms interject and attack both sides. Things are not going well for the forces of Cobra or G.I. Joe, and they are forced to work together to defeat the worms. The plan they come up with is to shoot the base of the stone columns which contain the worms. The worms will float up, and as the water pressure decreases, the worms will explode in what can only be described as an incredibly painful death. Once the worms are defeated, G.I. Joe and Cobra attempt to split the heavy water. For a brief moment, Cobra attempts to take all the water and there's a Mexican standoff, but it gets diffused pretty quickly and the Joes head back to the surface. Once there, Duke calls Dr. Vandermeer on a cordless phone, and Vandermeer lets him know that Cobra is demanding that G.I. Joe surrender at once or they will disintegrate all of New York City. What's weird about this phone is on Dr. Vandermeer's end, it's a video phone, and on Duke's end, it's just a phone. So I wonder if they're watching him from, well, they don't have any satellites in space because Cobra has control of all the satellites. So is this just a spy cam or... Man, no idea.
The Cobra Commander demands G.I. Joe surrender at once, or he'll disintegrate New York City.
We find ourselves at the cabin of the blind mountain man of the Arctic, where he's wrapped Snake Eyes in what looks like a dirt burrito. He claims that the simple dressing of leaves and herbs will draw out the radioactive contamination. Snake Eyes was irradiated so badly that he was glowing in the dark, and there's just a pile of dirt and leaves that'll draw out cancer. Who is this old man? Why is he in the woods? Why does he have a laser spear? Why does he have the cure for cancer? Why does he know so much?
Your radiation sickness is gone, me bucko. A simple dressing of leaves and herbs draws out the contamination.
He then informs Snake Eyes that he can retrieve his uniform from the hooks on the wall. He's undressed him, but cannot see the terrible disfigurement of his face due to his blindness. The old man hands him the radioactive canister, which he went back and fetched from the snowdrift, and tells him there's an old ice boat on the eastern side of the Sea of Ice that he can use to get back to civilization. The first thing I thought is that Snake Eyes will never get back to G.I. Joe headquarters in any amount of time that will make any amount of difference in the current conflict. So I did some math. The first thing I checked is the average speed of an ancient ice boat. The speed is 48 knots or 55 miles per hour. I then decided that Snake Eyes would probably head for Nome, Alaska, which is one of the northernmost cities in America that still contains an airfield. Nome is 143 miles from the Arctic Circle, at 55 miles per hour, roughly 3 hours of travel time. Next, Snake Eyes would radio G.I. Joe headquarters and get a private jet sent to him. The average speed of a private jet is 610 miles per hour. If he's traveling back to Washington, D.C., which is 3,784 miles, that would take 6.2 hours. But you need 6.2 hours to get the jet sent to him in the first place, so 12.4 hours, plus the original 3 hours of boat travel time equals 15.4 hours of travel time. Totally possible to make an impact on the upcoming conflict. The old man sends Snake Eyes on his way back to civilization with no explanation of who he is or what he's doing out there. And that got me thinking. Okay, bear with me. Apophenia, the tendency to perceive a connection or meaningful pattern between unrelated or random things, such as objects or ideas. What psychologists call apophenia. The human tendency to see connections and patterns that are not really there gives rise to conspiracy theories. George Johnson. In 1935, there was a 15-year-old tomboy named Natty Gann, the daughter of Saul Gann, an out-of-work logger forced to move to Seattle in search of work. Left behind, Natty's only option to see her father again was to make the trek across America, aided only by her faithful wolf companion. Why is this important? Charlie Linfield, a blacksmith of the same era, roughly 40 years of age, 200 pounds, a compassionate man who loved animals. Why is he important? The blind mountain man of the Arctic, roughly 88 years of age, bearded, 200 pounds, blinded by the ravages of time, loves animals, very compassionate. What's the connection between all of these characters? The wolf. Timber. I believe that Snake Eyes is Natty Gann. In 1935, Natty Gann was 15 years of age. 1983 minus 1935 is 48. 15 plus 48 is 63, and although that seems like an advanced age for a military operative like Snake Eyes, I am going to point out the fact that fitness guru Jacques towed 65 boats in Lake Akashino near Tokyo, Japan while he was handcuffed and shackled, and the boats were filled with 6,500 pounds of Louisiana Pacific pulpwood. He did that all at the age of 65. Natty rescued her wolf from a dog-fighting ring, whereas Snake Eyes rescued his from a hunter's trap. Both characters were rescued by reclusive mountain men, Snake Eyes by the blind man of the Arctic, and Natty by the reclusive blacksmith Charlie Linfield. Both characters were thought dead, Natty after her wallet was found in the remains of a derailed train, and Snake Eyes after he made the long walk into the radioactive cloud. Natty felt it would be easier to sneak across America disguised as a boy. Snake Eyes never speaks, always covers his face, and could easily be a girl. In fact, I suspect that he definitely is Natty Gann. What's all this supposed to mean? Supposed to mean? I think everyone here knows what this is supposed to mean. We've gone over something again and again. Certain questions get answered. Others spring up. The mind plays tricks on you. You play tricks back. It's like you're unraveling a big cable knit sweater that someone keeps knitting and knitting and knitting and knitting. If you'd like to learn more about the origin of Snake Eyes, please check out The Journey of Natty Gann. Back at G.I. Joe headquarters, Duke delivers the Joe's supply of heavy water to Dr. Vandermeer, who immediately dumps it in the mass device's fish tank. The doctor brings up the fact that the Joes must surrender to Cobra unless they can come up with a miracle, and the miracle comes in the form of a killer satellite built by Steeler, Clutch, and Short Fuse, who I thought was Blowtorch. This is the first time they've mentioned him by name. Dr. Vandermeer fucks up the compliment sandwich pretty bad by talking a bunch of shit about the satellite before swerving at the end and deciding it's an okay invention.
It's a killer satellite. It's all mounted in a portable launch gantry and everything. Well, what do you think? Crude, roughly constructed, but magnificent.
Vandermeer runs the launch and is controlling the satellite on the way to destroy the relay star. Things are looking pretty good for the Joes when a warning light goes off on Destro's console. He sends an entire team of shock troops to the mass device's launch pad and sends them into space to shoot down the Joe's satellite. While he's doing all this, he mentions that this will use up all of the catalytic elements, so this is a one-way trip to space for these shock troopers. They're all definitely going to die. So, total death count, G.I. Joe, Episode 3, 10. The shock troops shoot down the Joe satellite and celebrate before burning up in the Earth's upper atmosphere.
Cobra rules!
Destro and Cobra Commander have a nice Wayne's World moment where the Commander mentions that Cobra rules.
We have failed to pull Cobra's fangs. You will have to surrender now, unless you can summon up a miracle.
And Dr. Vandermeer retorts with an excellent snake pun. Just when all seems lost, Snake Eyes returns to G.I. Joe headquarters carrying a tube of the red crystal. He seems surprisingly not angry at all that he was left to die in the Arctic. I guess either no one knows sign language and can't hear his complaints, or he's just a very forgiving type. The tube ends up being a booby trap loaded with explosives and a paralyzing gas. I know all of this because Duke talks to himself more than anyone else.
The fumes! They have paralyzing properties! Must get rid of them before it's too late!
Possibly another side effect of his recent extensive memory loss. The episode ends with the Joes in pretty big trouble, and there's a recap of what will happen next time on G.I. Joe. Yet again, the lack of a knowing is half the battle segment totally bums me out, so I've decided to add one of my own at the end of each episode. So, knowing is half the battle. Something you should know about is Detective Byron, spelled Detektivbyra with a weird little circle, and it's a Swedish trio of instrumental musicians playing electronica and folk music based out of Karlstad. The members are Anders Molin, Martin Molin, and John Nils Emanuel Eskram. My favorite record by them is definitely Wormland, spelled Wermland, released in September of 2008. If you like cool, kitschy music and neat visuals, check them out. If you have anything you think I should know about, please send it my way. I love new media and I love seeing new things, so hopefully this is a way that I can actually crowdsource awesome stuff. As far as my final thoughts on the episode, I didn't quite like this episode as much as the last one. I thought that the pacing was not nearly as good. The last one really had a good balance. Also, the fact that they don't explain all the characters that seem like main characters, at least in the episode, or give any type of backstory is a little bit annoying. I am looking forward to continuing on with the series, and if you're enjoying yourself, please leave us a good review or some comments or just communicate. I'd love to hear what you guys think. All right, I'll see you guys next time. Yo, Joe.